Well, you know how in the past I've talked to you about Rudyard and some of his work. He talks about your starting map position, like turning reality into a video game. He's like, yeah, when you're in the center of the map, and you're smashed between plains people and hill people, it's not a good thing.
For the Slavs?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. There was a video I watched of Thomas Sowell where he was talking about it was kind of a dual thing. He was talking about the geographical advantages of Western Europe and the geographical disadvantages of Africa specifically, as far as like globally, those two places like it's like Africa is like the worst place to start, and Western Europe is like the best place. And like talking about all the reasons why. A lot of it was down to navigable waterways and like how I forget. I wish I knew the number. I need to go back and revisit the video because it was like the longest traversable waterway from the ocean in Africa is only like 30 miles or something like that before you run into like waterfalls or things that make it where you have to either unload ships and then like load up on top of a hill and to keep going. Versus like in the US is like number one. But even in Western Europe, there's a ton of rivers that just go all over the place and there's no huge drop-offs or obstructions. But like the Mississippi Basin has more navigable waterways by itself than the entirety of Africa combined. It's like hundreds and hundreds of miles. You can go almost anywhere west of or east of the Rockies, like within a couple dozen miles on one of the rivers connected to the Mississippi. You just go down and just go up this one. And And in our modern road-based thoughts as modern people, we don't think about that as being such an advantage. But even today, we still use rivers. Go down to St. Paul's. Look at all the barges that are on the river there. It's an incredibly cheap way to transport a huge amount of goods.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's very efficient and it's very effective. And we don't think about the significance of that for commerce, not just for domestic trade of us being able to bring stuff to Ohio or things like that, but like internationally, you can take stuff from anywhere in the world and sail right on up with those goods right all the way to St. Paul.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge advantage for international trade for the country at large. So,
right. Well, and the places with enormous advantages do vary a little bit based on the stage of society, right?
Of course.
Because the rivers are immensely important for sure, but I think that's part of why we see so much really powerful civilization around the Mediterranean, when other places were kind of struggling to get things kicked off. There's a lot going on in China.
Proximity. Trade is a huge driver of development, and proximity is a huge driver of trade.
Absolutely. So, but the Mediterranean being the way it was, the climate there combined with all of the flexibility of that water, combined with, the Mediterranean Sea is not a joke, but it's not the Pacific. It's not the Atlantic, right?
Oh, of course. It's much more, it's famously dangerous in some times, but it's much more traversable than some larger oceans and things like that.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and it's really interesting to see the interplay of how those things go down as well, throughout history, and where things go and where things stagnate and how it all moves. And like I mentioned earlier, right, when you run into the combination of like a hill people versus a plains people, and how that really plays into how societies develop in a really big way. That's fascinating. That's truly interesting. So
one thing I find really interesting is like you're talking about stages of development. There is a tremendous amount of raw material in the interior of Africa that Western countries would really like to have right now. There's a lot of like lithium and things like that raw materials that don't do any good to a developing nation for their own purposes. Really, they don't necessarily have the technology and infrastructure to process those materials and to use them in their own technology. Where more advanced society can, like tribal people aren't going to help. It doesn't matter if you find uranium as a tribal person. It's a bad, dangerous rock, but it doesn't help you in any way. But if you are an advanced nation or trying to develop nuclear stuff, like that's thousands of years of civilization development to be able to actually make use of this stuff. The other part of that is that a lot of those raw materials in Africa are in the interior, whereas much more dangerous and a lot harder to get the materials out to the ocean to ship them elsewhere. Right. Which again plays into the significance of geography and those things. But to go back to your comments about the Mediterranean, the thing that is also overlooked in that is that this is a time period where we had not yet mastered open sea travel to the degree that we have obviously today, but even during like the Vikings were pioneers in that and being able to sail and be able to not lose their way in a vast ocean. The Mediterranean is uniquely sized and shaped that it makes it very easy to just sail along the coast all around. And so there wasn't necessarily a huge need for them to be able to navigate open water, which is a huge advantage for trade. And then there's also the element, like if you're in Rome and you want to go to Alexandria, you don't even have to just skip along the coast. You can just head south because it's essentially an enclosed system. The odds of you sailing through Gibraltar and not seeing the opening as you go, you're just like, where are we? We're just out in the ocean all of a sudden. Like you're essentially in a giant lake. You're like, well, I know we need to go south. And then once we pick up the coastline there, we'll just sail along the southern coast. Or we need to go north and we'll just find our way. Like the times that they actually had to sail open water, they know that there's land on the other side.
You actually just made me think of something.
Oh dear.
Compare Lake Superior size to I totally mispronounced that. Mediterranean Sea is 30 times the size of Lake Superior. So if we
sounds about right.
But if we look at some of these bays, they're not bays, they're too big to be bays. But when we compare some of these, areas, Lake Superior is bigger than some of these sections.
Another significant thing with the Mediterranean is there's no hurricanes in the Mediterranean, unlike the Atlantic Ocean.
Interesting. Yeah. Anyway, I think, Superior is an interesting touch point in terms of comparing to Mediterranean, but obviously Mediterranean is much bigger.
Well, even like what we were saying about the Great Lakes, about the Mississippi River Basin. Right. That covers a huge, tremendous amount. But you also have the Great Lakes, because you cannot sail an ocean liner up the Mississippi River. But you can sail it almost halfway across the country because of the way that the Great Lakes chain together to essentially form a giant river. Right. Once that became traversable, like the fact that you have huge iron deposits in northern Minnesota, and it's a very short travel to get that to Duluth and then sail that anywhere in the world. Or in the America's case, sail it down to Pittsburgh and process it into steel. Yep. And the advantages that gave us as a developing nation during the Industrial Revolution and both world wars, to be able to have a very enclosed, safe. The only risk is if Canada was our enemy, because the lakes are like sharing that border. But like we are as in the center of the continent, we're like, it's a giant moat of land, so like around our steel production, and like very few countries have that kind of advantage. with their industry.
True that.
To keep it so protected and insulated from outside threats. There weren't any U-boats sailing into the Great Lakes to sink our steel industry ships.
Right. Interesting. Well, there's some good infographics on this. I like this. Here's one comparing the Mediterranean Sea to the United States.
In size?
Yeah. Yeah, the whole Mediterranean Sea fits inside the United States.
I believe that, yeah. I've been really interested to see how often it's come up with my friends who I've met from Europe, that they have no scale, no sense of scale of how big the United States is. And they'll make statements about traveling here that astound you as someone who's an American who has a better sense of these things. Of like, oh, well, I'll go here and then I'll just drive over to this city and we'll do that too. And it's like, you realize that's like a 12-hour drive. Like you have no idea. Like that distance is bigger than your entire country.
So I was having this, conversation just a couple of months ago with somebody. I was like, yeah, I'm coming to visit America for the first time. And I think I'm going to go here, and here. And I went, how many weeks is this trip? He's like, oh, I think I'm going to do it in 6 days. I said, no, you're not. And he said, what do you mean? And I said,
couldn't fly those trips in 6 days.
And I said, okay, so here's the thing. The United States of America is 50 states. I live in a medium-sized state. My state is the size of Great Britain.
Of the entirety of Great Britain.
Right. The entirety of Great Britain. Not England, Great Britain.
Yes.
And he went and looked it up and was like, oh. I said, yeah. So if you say to Americans, you're not traveled, you're not cultured, blah, blah, blah. Yes. Okay. We're not cultured in the same way that Europeans are.
Yes.
Right. And we largely just speak English, almost all of us, but tons of subcultures, tons of differences between states and between cities. And this place is massive.
Right.
Right. It's if you have visited dozens of states, you probably have a lot more, travel under your belt in terms of miles than visiting a dozen countries in Europe. Not necessarily, but probably. And we travel longer distances. It's also really interesting when I talk to my friends who live in London, friends and colleagues who live in London or in the London area. Right. And for them, a 2-hour drive is half the distance of a 2-hour drive for us, because they're in the city, they can't move as quickly. I find that really interesting. It's a little different outside of London, for sure. But when they talk about it's a 2-hour trip to get here or there, I look at the actual distance in miles and go, it's not very far. So,
yeah.
I
don't know. Do they not have the same kind of freeways, like an interstate system? I know the mainland in Europe has some. Maybe not as extensive as the U.S. is.
Well, yeah. I mean, they just have much, much better transportation overall, and the roads are a lower priority. So the further outside of the cities you get, the better. The more the roads are critical. I'm not saying the roads get better necessarily, but in terms of the roads become a higher priority when you can't have as dense of public transportation due to the population. But
so I mean, our train lines weren't completed until late 1800s to even connect one side of the country to the other. They already had extensive rail systems in Europe prior to that point. So these all developed prior to cars. It's kind of like, I think, was it South Korea? I was just reading about that South Korea has this like hyper advanced mobile data and Wi-Fi systems because they started to implement them after that technology already had become widespread in the US. So while the US is the equivalent of an old, say Boston, where like the middle of town is very clearly was created when people walked everywhere and cars didn't exist, and all the streets are weird little circles and not like a traditional grid like we see in more modern road systems. It's kind of America's telecommunications are like that, where we've kind of been developing it and filling it in as we go, versus taking technology that's already on stage 5 and implementing that as your base instead of stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 kind of be built on top of each other. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And so you kind of see that, I feel like, with the U.S. transportation, is that like if Europe had developed in a similar way or time frame as the U.S., they might have a lot more cars. But because trains became a thing and were put into place before, and there's already an infrastructure in place, they don't have to build it from scratch. You see how many billions of dollars people spend here trying to set up train lines, even within cities, and it's wildly expensive. But once it's done, everyone's happy that it's there. Everyone's like, oh, this is so great. Look at this light rail line in Minneapolis. It was a bit of a boondoggle when it was being built. But now that it's been paid for, people don't really care as much about how it was paid for or how it was built. They just like that it's there and they can use it. And it's the same thing. We don't want to think about or talk about how expensive were these trains when they built them in the 1700s or the 1800s, whenever they were built. All the people who paid for them died a long, long time ago. So we get to just reap the benefits. Mm-hmm. Let me see. I'm going to look at the average state is 75,000 square miles, it says. So that is the equivalent of Senegal. Okay. The country of Senegal is the closest to, in square mileage, to the average U.S. state size. For context, Syria is a little bit below that in size. Mm-hmm. We do have, what we see here is Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, and New Hampshire and Vermont dragging everyone else down. Yes.